Hello people, welcome back to my channel Fitness Geek. In today's video, we are going to build this architecture in Azure DevOps. So we'll be using Azure DevOps for our CI/CD pipelines and creating this infrastructure. We'll be using these four tools: Visual Studio Code, Azure DevOps Organization, Azure Subscription, and the Terraform extension in DevOps Organization. This is how our branching strategy will look like. We'll be using trunk-based development, so all the environments will be deployed from main. All the work will be done on feature branches, tested in a sandbox. Once you have, you know that this is what you exactly want to build, you have verified, then you push your changes as a PR, and the PR gets validated and then merged into main, from where it gets deployed in further environments. You can have your approval gates as well for each environment. This is our repo. This not the repo, but this is our the folder that contains all our configuration files. We have this is exactly the folders that we used in our previous video to create the infrastructure. So we have done that locally, so you can see the terraform.lock HCL file. But today we will be actually creating this in CI/CD Azure DevOps. Let's get started. Let's create our Azure DevOps project. Security policies, let's save. Go back to our, okay, let's create our project. Let's name it Fitness Geek ISE. Let's keep everything as is. Let's create a public repo. So the repo has been created. Now we will create a remote branch for this DevOps repo. So you can use your Git remote, or just you can also use the UI in your Visual Studio Code to create the remote. I prefer just typing out in the terminal, so I'll be using that. Let me create this. Git remote, add origin and the branch, and the URL of your repo in Azure DevOps. Remote is created. Let's now push our local repo to the remote. I made a mistake. I did origin A, so I'll have to change that. Let me just change it. Now I can do the git push origin O. It will ask you to sign in to your Azure DevOps organization. That's my sign-in information at hotmail.com. Next, your password. If you have got multiple factor authentication, then you can use that. Let's refresh our Azure DevOps. Yep. So we now have our code pushed into the Azure DevOps repo. This is our pipeline YAML file, the Azure pipeline -dev YAML pipeline. This is what we'll be using to create our pipelines. Yeah, as you know, like Azure DevOps used to have the classic UI-based pipelines, and now they are pushing towards the YAML-based, pipeline as a code. And these YAML files are really easy to create. If you do it once or twice, and it will be really uh, easy to just tweak things and type things. Whatever you used to do it in the UI can be done in the YAML, and even better. Let's make some change and do a push. Yeah, comment added. All right, so we are set. First thing to do is we need to create a service connection. This is our project, so we need to create a service connection that will allow us to access the Azure subscription. So this Azure DevOps will use this service connection to create resources in our Azure subscription. So you create your service connection. So this is the name that I have used in my YAML file. So I'll give this name to my service connection. I'm using the manual way of creating because I've got a service principal, and I'll be using that service principal. You can use the recommended way, and if you have direct connection and you can see your subscriptions, then yeah, you can go ahead and do that. But in my case, I'll be using the service connection that already exists. If you see my app registrations, I've got a service principal that I'll be using. I'll get all the details. This is a service principal I'll use to configure my service connection in Azure DevOps. I'll just enter all the required information from our subscription, the service principal name, service principal ID, and the key. So you can generate a client secret client key, and you can use that here. And the tenant ID. All is done. Let me just verify. Succeeded. Let's save it. So our service connection is done. We have created the service connection, and that particular service principal has got permissions to the access that it needs on the subscription, whether it's a contributor or owner, whatever you feel right for the service principal. So you can grant that permission, and it will use that permission to create all the resources. This is our YAML file. We have given an environment dev, and all the backend settings are part of it. I'll be sharing this repo in my GitHub, so you can just use it to create your pipelines. This YAML has got variables defined. The variables make it very simple to deploy to change for multiple environments. And so let me just save this. So the pipeline has been created using our YAML file. Now we will need the extension. Currently we don't have any extension here. Let's browse the marketplace, search for Terraform. There are a few, but I'll be using the Microsoft DevLabs. And install. Proceed to organization. So we have got everything available now. We have got the pipeline setup, service connection setup, the Terraform extension installed as well. So we are almost there to do our first build and release. If you see my YAML file, we have got, what we are doing is we have like multiple stage. The first stage is where we do static code analysis using the Chekhov. Chekhov is from Bridge Crew, and it gives you a very well, a structured way of static code analysis and security related information. So it will tell you what all mistakes you have in your code, or the vulnerabilities that can be exposed via your code, so you suppress them. So all those things can be done using your Chekhov. Then I've got a validation which validates my Terraform code for any syntax errors. Then we do a plan and then the apply. In plan stage, we have got what we are doing is we have got multiple approval gates, so that we do not run into issues where our code just gets applied, because when you're running it from a CI/CD, we use auto approve. So we don't want our code to just get deployed in environments without our approval. So if you go through my YAML, you will see how I'm using the deployment environment for approval. And also you can add some manual validation steps where until validated, it will not proceed to another stage. So let's just push our changes again. Our repo, the main. Okay, the changes here. The pipeline is there. Let's now run our first release. Let's run our pipeline. If you see, there's an approval stage for an environment could not be found, so the environment does not exist. So I'll have to create that environment. Click environments and create new environment. Dev is our environment name. You can add the approvals. Just click on that and it will give you what all security approvals you can add. So I've done that. Let me run the pipeline again. Main. Obviously we are running from main branch. We are not doing all those sandboxes for now, but when you do it in your actual environment, your workplace, you should always have a sandbox where you test everything before you actually deploy it. So our pipeline has failed, and if you see the error, no hosted parallelism has been purchased or granted. To request a free parallelism grant, please fill out the form, blah 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 blah. Okay, so since I have not purchased any pipeline, the we have not purchased any hosted agents, and we are trying to use the free ones. We'll have to request it from Microsoft. If you see this URL, let me just paste it here. Yeah, so I'm just trying to use the free one. Let me just fill out the form. You would have seen this error whenever you try to test it out for the first time and you get this error. What you just need to do is just fill out the form, and like it takes like 24 hours, and they will reach back to you saying that you have free agents available to test out your pipelines. Just filling out the form, giving them my organization name and so on. That's my organization and my repo. Okay. That's the URL. If you see the fourth question, are you requesting for public or private? I have said I'm trying for public because my repo is public. Filled out the form. Let's just submit this and we will wait till we get a confirmation from Microsoft. It doesn't take too long. Okay, so it's a new day. Took me like 24 hours to get the response, and they have completed it. I've got hosted agents available. They just asked me to make my project a private one, not the public. So I have just made my repo as, I mean, my project as private, and now I should be able to run my pipelines. Let's go back to our pipeline. Let's look at let's run the pipeline again. It is in progress. It's running now. It means the Microsoft has provided me the free hosted agents to run my pipelines. You can easily go ahead and purchase as well, but yeah, I thought just to use the free ones that's available. As you can see, our first stage is our check of static code analysis. You see 26.6% tests passed. So it will actually flag things. For example, if you have a storage account and you are not making sure that it is publicly accessible, like if you have allowed publicly accessible, then it will be flagged and it will be thrown as failed. So if you see this tab, it has got all the check of tests, what what was tested and what failed. And if you have to bypass things, what you need to do is you need to add a skip, and the check off a test number and give a reason why you want to skip that, and it will be skipped. So all those things can be done using Chekhov. I would definitely recommend you to have a look into the Chekhov test codes, the codes that they have, and how you can skip them and how you can bypass them if you do not want that to be tested. Our, okay, so our pipeline has failed due to our state file because we have used this project locally and our remote already exists. So it will ask you to migrate the state. I do not want to use my old state as I've already destroyed my infrastructure. I'll just remove the state file for now. Let me just drop this. I do not need it. I've destroyed the infrastructure that I created in our last video, and this should just do the job. I can run it again. Run new. Actually, I can just do a rerun failed jobs. Or I can do rerun all jobs. I've clicked rerun all jobs. Now it will run our entire jobs at the stage where it failed. So Terraform validation or Terraform validate is being run again. Our build failed again. Okay, it is due to the same state file. Okay, everything looks alright. Not sure why it would fail. I don't have this remote state which I created last week, so that should not cause the issue. Okay, yeah. So this Terraform folder, if you see, it got pushed from my local setup, and yeah, it has got a tf state file. So yeah, I don't need that. Because we are providing all the backend information in our YAML file, so we don't need this anymore. Sync changes. Let's run this. Wait for a couple of minutes for this to complete. Hopefully, I hope there will be no more errors. And yeah, the first few times when you actually set up your CI/CD, you always have a few errors, and then you fix it and you do it. And once you have set it up, then it's just a cakewalk. It's always the first few setup bits which are a bit of a headache, but after that it's a smooth sailing. Chekhov's done. Validate in progress. Then you have got an approval gate. At this stage, if you see, the pipeline needs permission to access a resource before this run. So it will ask you to actually approve it. So this is the permission to use the environment dev that we have created. So there's a part in the YAML. Let me just show you where it is. Yep. So if you see the deployment job with environment, so what it does is it uses that environment, and if you have got any approval checks there, it will ask for approval. Let it grant the permission to use that environment. Now it asks for approval because I've added myself. In case you're working with multiple devs, you can add other devs for approval. So Terraform plan is in progress. So if you see the command Terraform plan and then the var file is where I'm giving our variable, our tf var file for dev environment. When you run it for QA, you pass the QA environment, var tf var file, and so on. This is the architecture that we are building. This is exactly what we built last week, but right now we are just pushing the same thing, but via CI/CD in Azure DevOps. If you look at the plan, let me scroll down. Come on. Yeah, if you scroll down, plan 22 to add. So if we run it, let's let's just look at the Terraform apply. So I'm running Terraform plan before, so you can have a look and then you give it the approval to go ahead and deploy. Our Terraform apply is running, so all the resources are getting created. I've just fast forwarded this one. So it is creating our entire application infrastructure, the logging and everything. The resources are getting created. It's working on Azure SQL. So we have got app services, we have got storage account, we have got function app, we have got key vault, and we are using VNet for VNet integration. So all the traffic goes through the subnets, via service endpoints. So that kind of an infrastructure. We got some error regarding the database. Azure SQL database does not support the size. Okay, so I'm aware of this error where if you use S0 and if the size is like 5 gigs, you get this error. So let me just change. Yeah, I've seen this error yeah, being reported by a lot of developers. For some reason, Terraform was treating this as it was converting that 5 dB size, that parameter has a very high value. I'm not sure why it is doing that. Let me just look at the documentation. Max size g and g underscore gb, that's the one that has reported issue, probably because I'm passing it within double quotes, so it is treating it as string. I'm not really sure on that, but let me make some changes and deploy again. Yeah, the tier standards, we're using S0 and it should be all right. Yeah, so max size underscore gb, yeah, I should not be using double quotes for that. All right, let's run it again. Saved, commit, change db size to 2, and I've removed the double quotes. So let's do the sync. Currently we are running the pipelines ourselves. You can configure it to have CI, so the moment you actually push it into main, it should trigger the pipeline. Now it should only be creating that particular resource that where it failed. All of the resources have been created successfully. Same, we'll just give it the approval. Let's look at the plan. 2 to add, 3 to change, 0 to destroy. That's all right. Let's give it the approval to apply as well. You can do a lot of things here. Right now I'm just pushing it into main, which is not a good practice. What you should do is you should have a policy where only PR is the way how you can push it into the main branch. That can be done from the settings of the branches, security policies, and you should always work on feature branches, and then your feature branches should be short-lived. You push it, merge it into main, and that's how you should make all the changes. But for this demo we are just trying to execute it. Alright, so the apply is successful. We have got our infrastructure created via Azure DevOps pipelines. Let's go and look at our resources. If you see, we have got a few outputs that we have in our configuration files. The backend URL, if I open the backend URL, it should throw me 403 because backend should not be accessible directly but only from the front end. The front end URL, it should be accessible. Let me just use the URL, and it is live. We have our Node.js runtime, and yeah, everything is done. We have created the databases, we have created the log analytics workspaces, and yeah, we have everything here. This is our app insights that we have configured. If you see the transaction search, there should be a few requests Yeah, that's when we use the URLs. So there were a few requests that we fired. It's being captured by our application insights. So basically logging has been configured, and you can use this for all the insights for your application, any failures, your application map, and all those things. You can use it for alerting as well. Let's just quickly have a look at our services and how our VNets are configured. This is our function app, which is, yeah, which will be our backend. Let's look at the networking side. It is VNet integrated. If you see the access restriction, front end access only, that's our Fitness Geek written VNet test FE subnet. That's the only subnet allowed, and that's our front end VNet integrated as well. So all the traffic that will be going from our front end to back end would be going from the Azure network backbone, because we are using the service endpoint. This is our SQL database. Let's look at the networking of our database. Actually, it should be in the server, not the database. So go to SQL Server, networking, and if you see, it's only allowed from selected networks, and that's our backend subnet, and the state is ready. So our service endpoints are all enabled via our Terraform as well. Backups, yeah, the default is 7 days. You can always increase it. You can always increase that. You can do it from Terraform, or you can do it from the portal and import that, change those changes, or sync those changes in your Terraform config files. So these are all the resources that we have built. This is the Key Vault. It has got our admin passwords, our connection string for the database. So the backend can just use this to call the database. And yes, that's it. We have got everything configured. That's the connection string that we have stored. That also we have done via Terraform. And yes, this marks the end of this small video. If you go back to your Azure DevOps, you will see these the summary and the tab for your tests and environments. If you go to the test, you can have a look at what exactly our checkoff is doing, and you can read more about it. And if there are tests that you want to cancel, you can do that. So we are doing plan scan as well. We are doing the actual static code scan as well. So checkoff is something you should definitely check out. And yeah, that marks the end of this video. Thanks a lot for all the support. Keep watching and keep supporting. Thanks a lot.